Students, hi! Welcome to Ceramics 1 in a wheel throwing video. What you need to throw on the wheel is this little bucket filled with water, and inside the bucket is a rubber rib tool, some sort of plastic tool, a wooden rib tool, a needle tool, and a sponge. Okay, all of that should go in your bucket. Your bucket should be filled with water. And then you need a bat. The bat is this black circle, yep. There's two little holes in the bat. And you put those on the two little pegs of the wheel. And this is what you're going to place your clay on. Your bat needs to be clean and dry. Your clay needs to be wedged. And you will throw your clay onto the bat. Then you turn the wheel on. The whole deal with throwing on the wheel is that you keep your clay wet the whole time, but not so wet that it wants to fall apart. So right now I'm centering the clay. I'm pushing with the heels of my hands directly away from myself, like I showed you with that gesture. That gesture right there. And we're going to do it again until that clay stops bobbling around and it stays put. So you can see now it's a little better. You can squeeze with your fingers and thumbs too, so that it is more centered. Then I'm going to take the wooden rib tool and lock it on the bat, and then push it up against the clay to kind of trim off the excess on the bottom. It seemed a little wobbly down there, so that's an easy way to do it. Now I'm going to cone the clay by pushing the clay down and then squeezing the clay together in my hands to create a cone. So what this does is gets the clay like ready to move and ready to be manipulated. The whole time you're doing that, it should stay pretty centered. Say you want to cone it 2 or 3 times. Again, kind of constantly getting a little bit of water from the bucket and putting it on there so everything's slippery. Now I'm trimming off the bottom again, just to keep everything nice and neat and easier to work with. And then I'm cleaning my bat, just so you can kind of see things a little bit better. Now what I'm doing is resting my hands on the bat, and then I'm resting my thumb on the top of the clay, and I'm going to find the middle of the clay so I know where to open it. So you should be able to see when I move my thumb here that there's a little divot in the top. That shows you where the center is. Now I'm going to take my hand, anchor it, and push my thumb straight down into the clay, and then pull my thumb towards my fingers a little bit to make that opening a little bit bigger. And it's not quite thin enough on the bottom, so I'm just repeating that process a little bit more. Now I'm going to stop the wheel and push the needle tool down through the base until it hits the bat, and then touch the base with my finger so I can see how thick the base is of my piece. So a good rule of thumb is like the width of your pinky finger. It can be a little bit thicker than that. We don't want it much thinner than that. Now I'm going to again anchor my hand and move my thumb towards my fingers. I'm not going to move my fingers at all. I'm just going to squeeze my thumb towards my fingers to open up the clay a little bit more so I can get ready to pull it. Again, a little bit of water a lot of the time. Cleaning my bat so it's easier for you to see. And then I'm going to pinch at the base of this piece, and I'm going to bring my fingers a little bit close together. I'm not going to squeeze really hard, and then I'm going to pull straight up. If you can tell, my elbows are both locked against my body so that I'm really steady and stable, and that the clay doesn't tell me where to go, I tell the clay where to go. I'm taking my sponge, I squeezed it out, and then I'm going to soak up all the water from the base, because even though we want to constantly keep our piece wet, we don't want it to get soggy. And now I'm just repeating the process again. I'm holding a sponge in my right hand because that's how I prefer to pull. Regardless of what shape you're creating for your final piece, everything starts with a cylinder. So all we're doing for the first couple of pulls is pulling straight up and making the piece as straight as we possibly can. Again, cleaning up all the extra water in the base. And now I'm just gonna, again, with anchored arms, I'm gonna press together with my hands, just because the clay wants to fling outward, and we're trying to make it as straight as possible. You can also use your wooden rib, hold it against the bat, and then clean up the bottom, and then hold it vertically, and it'll help straighten out the side of your piece. And then I'm just going to pull one more time. I'm showing you that the rim is about the width of my pinky finger. And now I'm compressing the clay again just to make sure that it's all straight up and down, because clay wants to fling out naturally on the wheel. And then I'm squeezing out my sponge and soaking up all the clay in the bottom. Or all the water in the bottom, sorry. And again, using the wooden rib just to keep everything straight. Now I'm going to trim the top off of the piece. So what you're going to do is you're going to go about a ½ inch lower than the top of your piece, and then you're going to push that needle tool through the clay until it goes all the way through and it's hitting your finger on the inside, and then you're just going to lift it straight up. That'll give you a nice even rim. I'm just smoothing it with my fingers. And now I'm showing you for the last pull or two. I mean, we only do this at the very end. Instead of just pulling straight up, I'm pushing out with my left hand and just guiding things with my right hand to try to create some sort of shape to my piece. So I'm just making like a little tiny vase that kind of is like a bubble or a bulb. So it's a little bit thinner on the bottom and widens out, and then we'll get thinner on the top again. I'm just using my wooden rib tool to carve off some of the excess clay on the bottom and straighten that ridge, or straighten the shape of it. Then I'm taking my hands on the top and just compressing them together. Clay doesn't love to, go back in once it's widened out, but you can do it as long as you keep steady and even. And now I'm doing the same thing, but I'm just using kind of the tips of my fingers because I feel like that gives me more control. So you can see I'm just pinching that one little area. Now I'm taking the sponge and trying to lift up the top so it just has a nicer shape from the outside. And now I'm just going to clean up the rim a little bit too. Clay really, it doesn't want to be soggy, it doesn't want to be too wet, so there does come a point where you really just need to be done. A lot of times students want to do one more thing really quick, and that's when a piece doesn't go well. So once you like the shape, try to stop playing with it. So you saw I just trimmed off the top again, and now I'm just trying to make the final touches with the rim. And again, this is really all I'm doing is touching that wooden rib to the outside to clean everything up, because at this point I know that I'm finished. So I'm just trying to get everything nice and neat and even one last time. There's not a lot of pressure here. Now I'm stopping the wheel to make sure I like the shape of it, see if there's any like blemishes on there, which just means like, you know, little fingerprints or places where the clay got a little sticky. So I'm just taking the sponge and getting rid of those areas. This is just going to create like a nice smooth outside surface. You should never ever touch your clay once you stop your wheel, because it's so wet at that point. Whatever you do is going to like smush it, make a mark, and just prevent things from being nice and neat and even. So now I'm done. I've stuck my finger in some of that extra clay, and I'm writing my initials on the bat so that when this stuff is drying, you know whose it is. Once it's leather hard, then you can actually write your initials in the bottom. So I just take the whole bat off of my wheel, and then the last part of this is how to clean up. So I just take the little sponge from my bucket and I clean off the wheel as best as I can, and then I'm going to clean up all the area around it too. Get rid of all that extra clay. You absolutely have to wipe down your wheel this year. I mean, we always do this anyways, but I want people to know that it's safe to use, that somebody else hasn't been there recently. This way we can tell when it's dry, and then we can fog it or use, you know, some sort of cleaning material on it before the next student uses it. We can't use any of that cleaning material if it's filled with clay. There's a little like lip underneath the wheel. That's where all the water sinks to, so that's what I was doing there, was just moving it all into the bucket. So there's a little bucket on the left-hand side that catches any extra clay, and you'll take that and put it, we have a big bucket to collect all of that wet stuff, and eventually we recycle it. So again, you need to wipe down everything and clean everything really well. And then you take your whole bucket of tools over to the sink. You clean the clay off of everything, including your bucket. You get rid of the water, and then you bring it back and you set it there so it's ready for the next person.